Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. I am your one of your two hosts, as always. Now, Charles Hamaker, joined by Bel. How you doing, Bel?
I'm doing well. How are you?
So we're getting back to cold season. Not a big fan of that, but we have a much busier sports week, as you said before we started this.
We do. So, first, we're going to start with recapping some key players for the Seahawks. We're just going to go down the line here. Chuck and I will both give our opinions as to who we think had key impacts this season.
So before we jump into the players, I want to just take a quick look at the season here. Finished with a 7-10 record, fourth NFC West. You're the only team in the NFC West to not make the playoffs. So 7-10 isn't the end of the world, but it could have been better, right? Obviously, it's been outside of that, not wanting to finish in the basement, right, of the division.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, ultimately, I guess one thing, if you want to look at the silver linings, 3 of the other teams in the division made the playoffs, right? One of them is currently playing right now. 2 of the other 2 play tomorrow. So, I mean, the NFC West is never an easy division, right? So, as you were saying, we're going to look into our season recap here. MVP, we both ended up with Tyler Lockett. Why did Tyler Lockett stick out to you as the team MVP?
For me, it was his consistency. He did finish off with 1,175 passing yards, and I thought that was significant in the season. And again, consistency.
Consistency is a big part of it. Part of why I had Tyler in that spot was because you have Russell, who really wasn't fully healthy for, I'd say, 90% of the season. Because I mean, he was back, but he wasn't himself. And to, like you said, to have over 1,000 yards in a season where your quarterback really isn't there all the time, that's pretty good. And it's, as a guy who was drafted as a kick returner to still be this presence, and as the years go on, of a steady wide receiver, for him to do that in a year like this, I think consistency is a good word to hammer on there. As we switch over to Offensive Player of the Year, I stuck with Tyler Lockett, but Bel had somebody else. Bel, do you want to talk about your selection there?
Yeah. So I went with Rashad Penny because I was, again, really impressed with the second half of the season. He finished the last 3 games with at least 135 rushing yards and a touchdown. And I think it just brightened the end of the season, even though, of course, they broke their 9 consecutive seasons with a winning record. It gives hope for what's to come.
Albeit not to be the guy who puts in a little bit of that. You still got to sign him to a contract.
Yes,
you still got to
see
that through. But to your point, he is somebody who said he wants to be back in Seattle. Seattle's home of sorts, right? The only reason I didn't have him in that category, because obviously you make a key point, 130 plus yards in all of those games, and to do so not only against like the Bears and the Lions, whatever, could throw that away.
Yeah.
Cardinals are no easy team, and they've kind of been a pesky, annoying team for as long as the Seahawks have had like a Pete Carroll and a Russell Wilson. I didn't pick him simply because it wasn't because compared to Tyler, it wasn't a full season thing, right? But I totally understand that, because I figure normally every year you could give it to Russell, maybe, but that I can't do that. Ultimately, his numbers weren't horrible. I mean, I think 26 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, not bad. But when I look at the season, I don't think of like the best player on the field being Russell Wilson, as has been in past seasons, right?
It wasn't a Russ-like performance for sure.
No, yeah. So we look over to Defensive Player of the Year. I had Jordan Brooks, but I want you to talk about DJ Reid.
Yes.
That is your pick.
It was. So I did DJ Reid because he started the season on the left side. In week 4, he got moved to a more comfortable position on the right side of the field. And since that move, he surrendered no touchdowns and ended the season with a pair of interceptions.
And has really kind of become the main cornerback here in Seattle. I mean, the guy that not a typical Pete Carroll cornerback, being 5'9", usually it's a little bit taller of a guy.
Yes.
We look at, if we're going to keep it in tune with what's going around in the NFL. Trey Flowers with the Bengals now moving on in the playoffs, 5'11" and up, former safety. DJ Reid's really kind of fit the mold here well. After being picked up off of waivers from San Francisco. I think that's a good pick. I just went with Jordan Brooks simply because of Jordan Brooks' consistency. Every week that we had the show going, it was either him or Bobby Wagner leading in tackles. I think Jamal Adams snuck in there maybe once, but it was always him or Jordan. And I know that Bobby's I'm sure he's a little bit upset about it, but Jordan, breaks the record that Bobby Wagner set a week ago for all-time lead tackles in a season and then tackles in a game in that Week 18 matchup against the Cardinals. So, for him to do that all in his second year, it only tells you about the ceiling, I feel like, and we're still going on. Second year, but not only that, but you've got Bobby Wagner teaching you. So I feel like that's where I stood with Jordan Brooks, a guy who isn't like making the big plays. Everybody wants to see interceptions and big hits and fumbles. Just consistently there, consistently having that impact. That's why I had Jordan Brooks. As we look to Rookie of the Year, we had a unanimous pick here. How about you talk about Trey Brown?
We went with Trey Brown. I went with Trey Brown specifically just because I saw a big improvement as a rookie. There was a key point for me in Week 10 against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. He was able to break Aaron Rodgers' pass to Allen Lazard for a turnover on downs. And that's an impressive thing to do when you're battling to try to score, because that game wasn't a good offensive performance for the Seahawks. So the defense was out there a lot of the time.
So a lot of your guys are going to get exposed a lot more when your offense is struggling. And like you were talking about, as a rookie to come in there and play, you're playing Aaron Rodgers too. You would know about Aaron Rodgers. It's no easy task. To go up against a quarterback like that and you're a rookie is like, okay, I'm playing against a rookie today. We're going to go at him. So for him to come in and have as much of an impact as he did, it sucks that he wasn't able to finish out the season. But again, to talk about like we did with Jordan Brooks, it's exciting to look forward to going into next year. Comeback Player of the Year should be obvious for multiple reasons. Rashad, do you have anything else? I know we talked about him as your Offensive Player of the Year, but is there anything else you want to talk about with Rashad?
No, I think overall just he was very impressive trying to fit a role that belonged to Chris Carson. And that was the biggest key signifier.
I know that we're going to talk about both of those guys down the road here, but it is interesting to think about, right? 130-plus yards with a line that kind of middle of the pack. Got to wonder if maybe you've got some controversy there, or maybe just splitting some carries going into next season. But certainly, I think it's a good problem to have, also, albeit when that contract is signed for Penny. Best signing, there wasn't too much, kind of similar to the rookies, and that's not playing down Trey Brown, but there wasn't a big batch to go off of for free agents. But Gerald Everett have our unanimous pick. What's your piece on Everett?
Everett, I think, is doing a good job as a tight end. He only had 7 targets inside of the 20-yard line, but out of those 7, he was able to convert 3 of those into points for the Seahawks. So.
And I know he had, I think it was the Niners game here at home where he had like a fumble and several drops and just had a really bad game. But outside of that, he did what he was asked to do. We didn't see as much of a Sean McVay offense as we were kind of teased about all offseason. But I think he came in and he did what he needed to do. The only problem is he was signed to a 1-year deal. So I think Seattle would want him back. It's just if he wants to be back. But I think Everett kind of got a little bit more hate than he should have. I think he filled in a pretty good role in his time here. And I think towards the end of the season, he was like the leading receiver several times. Not against Arizona, but like several times he was a leading guy. Game of the year, we're split here. It makes sense to me, but what made Week 14, the win at Houston, stick out as opposed to like maybe Detroit where you score 50 points?
For me, again, it was Rashad Penny's presence. And this was the game where he broke out and scored 2 touchdowns and had, I think it was 137 rushing yards. Yeah. So this was the beginning of Rashad Penny, and it was also a dominant performance by the Seahawks, which you would assume is obvious against a Houston Texans team that's struggling. But again, just being able to identify that someone's going to have such a big role moving forward, I think that's important.
Yeah, that's the resurgence of Rashad there, I guess, for you is your sticking point. And that makes sense. Yeah, because it's kind of like, hey, what is this? Like, is this a apparition or is this real? And then just kind of continued over the course of the next few weeks. I had a tough point because, when you think of a game of the year, it's like it's a really tight game that has significance to me, right? Like a playoff game, like a clinch the playoff situation. Or, it's like the most complete game. You could look at Houston, you could look at Detroit, you drop 50 points. I looked at Arizona just because, you kind of looked maybe the best all year against a good opponent. You stop Arizona from winning the NFC West title. And I always like beating Arizona. So that is why I picked Week 18 to win at Arizona. Biggest issue to address. It seems like these are both offensive issues. I want you to talk about Russell and his love-hate relationship with his offensive line.
Yes. So Russell is really good at scrambling, and I know that he can find his guys doing so, but I think that it would be way better for the offense if Russ had a lot more time in the pocket to try to let the play go out, read it, and then, of course, make his pass.
And I think that's something that we should look at potentially next week is like free agency, or just something that we need to look at, right? Free agency, who you want to target, who to bring back, because, we talked about free agents, a topic ago or two, and didn't mention that there weren't that many signings, right? Ethan Postage was a guy that we re-signed. I would want to move on from that because if you want to keep Russell Wilson happy, for one, you want to give him time in the pocket. You want to keep those rushing lanes open for a Rashad Penny or a Chris Carson. You need like average to above average guys at basically all the positions. You look at some of the best lines in the league, like a Green Bay, like in Indianapolis. They have guys all along the league who they may not be like great. They're not all Pro Bowl caliber, but they work well. They got good chemistry with their other guys on the line, and they are all like at least average guys. We talk about Indianapolis. Mike Lewinsky, their right guard, is actually a former Seahawk. So I understand that too, and I would like to see Seattle get a new center and a new right tackle. But that's just more importance on free agency. My biggest issue this past season was inability to adjust. If Russell Wilson, he's not healthy, you got to be able to give him like easy passes, right? Quick stuff. Just don't try to make him do moon balls like that. You talked about that game against Green Bay, right?
Right.
Poor offensive performance. One of the first few weeks, I think it was the first week off of injured reserve.
It was.
And you got to give him stuff that's easy, stuff that are layups. You got to get him in rhythm. It just didn't really feel like the offense was able to do that the first few weeks. And even before the injury, you got to be able to adjust off of what the other team gives you. You can't leave your defense out there for long periods of time. So as we look at it, it's a really head-scratching season, right? Because you had some good performances, but ultimately not at all where you wanted to be. What are you looking forward to next season, the 2022-2023 season, obviously after hopefully a successful offseason?
Continuing to think that Tyler Lockett and Metcalf are going to excel at their roles. I think that Chris Carson coming back is going to be a key part of the offense. But you can also see different variations. So it could be Chris Carson and Rashad Penny, like you said, splitting the touches, or even just moving forward with a Rashad Penny. Russell Wilson will have options for passing and for rushing, and I think that's an exciting thing to look forward to.
I think that's a good point you bring, is balance, right? Because you can have the greatest wide receivers and the greatest quarterback there is, but if a defense is ultimately able to hone in on that, you got to be able to run the ball.
Right.
And I'm not saying, maybe the Pete Carroll side of things where you want to run the ball, And as someone who grew up around here, I mean, the Huskies tend to run the ball.
Mm-hmm.
My high school tends to run the ball. So I'm used to running the ball, but balance is such a huge thing. You don't want to get one-dimensional. So I think, having a good balance is so key to having a good offense and keeping your defense off the field.
Oh, yeah.
I look forward to, another year Russell Wilson. I know that we're going to touch on it here in a second, but you guys know me. I don't touch on the rumor stuff. And as Jordan Brooks, I wasn't entirely sure about the selection. I was more mad at Rashad Penny's pick simply because it was a running back at the time. And I was like, we don't need another running back. Hindsight, this and that.
Yeah.
But Jordan Brooks was kind of a question mark for me. And, to be in his second year and to lead the league, I don't believe he led the league, but to set records in tackles in a season by a second-year guy, that's a big deal. And I think that'll only get better with more time around Bobby Wagner, and just his natural development. So just to take a quick look back here, all of the topics: most valuable player, offensive player, defensive player, rookie of the year, comeback player, best signing, and then game of the year. As we wrap up our season in review here, we move over to some injury stuff. Quandre Diggs out 4 to 5 months officially. I think we talked about that last week, kind of a 4-month time frame. Had successful surgery on his broken fibula and dislocated ankle. But now the big thing is contract. So, I mean, if I'm asking you, not to say, I don't know. If I'm asking for a definite answer, do you think we're looking at an extension here for Quandre Diggs, hopefully this offseason? Because, I mean, he's a free agent now. And how many years would you, if I put you in John Schneider's chair, how many years are you giving a Quandre Diggs?
I would say that I would give him at least 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was, honestly, for Defensive Player of the Year, it was hard not to want to pick Quandre because of his performance this season. So I think you keep him around. I also think that it varies depending on what Russell does. Of course, the chips fall around him, so he will be key in determining who stays, I think.
Yeah, because there was supposed to be a big meeting with Jody Allen, now, the sister of Paul Allen, now owner of the Seahawks, Pete Carroll, and John Schneider. I guess it happened, but there's no definitive statement, so I'm assuming we're running it back, which has become kind of the mantra of the Seahawks Twitter, is running it back. And I'm assuming Russell's going to be here, all the comments at the end of the year, right? But yeah, I mean, unless we got to figure that out, put this on the table, figure out what's going on, because then we're able to finally address this off season. You're looking at $44 million in cap space. So yeah, I think 2 to 2. I'm thinking like 3 to 4 years.
Okay.
3 may be comfortable most for Quandre, but it's not like you don't have the resources right now. It's just about, there's some key guys you need to bring back. I think a DJ Reid is in there as well. So there's some key things to address contract-wise. Looking into team notes, middle linebacker Bobby Wagner earns second-team All-Pro honors. It is his 8th consecutive season with All-Pro honors. And linebacker Jordan Brooks did receive 1 All-Pro vote. Quandre Diggs receiving none, which is a little bit of a surprise there. Adrian Peterson is going to reportedly later consider coaching. He says he's not ready to retire quite yet, but his time in Seattle has kind of shined a light on the potential for that. And so that might be interesting, but ultimately, obviously we're not in his camp, so we don't know everything, but I have to feel like it's a year or 2 left for AP. I mean, last season he played with us for
was it a game?
I think it was a game. I think it was the Niners game. He
Yeah.
scored a touchdown, and then it was the back issue that held him out. It was cut by Tennessee. He played with Washington a year or 2 ago. I got to think you're running out of options here, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if there's much more of a stick to go off of here. I don't know if there's much more of a journey for him to take.
You can't bounce around forever.
No, and especially, it's not like you're playing a Madden franchise. You're not aging, right? He's getting older.
Yeah.
And as much as he is AP, the value is going down, I'm sure. Backup quarterback Geno Smith was arrested early Monday morning for driving under the influence. Smith was reportedly going 96 miles per hour and refused a breathalyzer test prior to his arrest. Smith did tweet out after the arrest that there is more to the story than just the headline, so that is something to monitor. But we did get the details about going 96 miles per hour or refusing a breathalyzer, so there's more to the story than that. Mm-hmm. I know that Smith was at the team meeting, the day after, but Pete Carroll wouldn't comment more than that.
Yeah, so I think he really is asking for sympathy just because, again, like you said, we don't know the whole situation yet. So he's just asking us to keep an open mind, and hopefully he fills us in soon.
Yeah, because, as when an athlete gets in something like that, obviously I feel like there can be the two sides of the coin, right? Because quick media wants to get out, oh, Geno Smith was arrested. What was he doing?
Yep.
But also there's the side of it as, oh, maybe there was a misunderstanding, right? So that'll be something to monitor. I'm not going to take any sides here. I'm just going to let it play out. And then, as we addressed earlier, today, at around 5 a.m., the first headline came out that Russell Wilson reportedly wants to explore his options. Wilson has not demanded a trade officially, but is curious if outside of Seattle may put him in a better position to win. I'm just going to ask you this, Bel. Are we buying into any of this?
No. I think there was some rumors going around last offseason, that he was not happy. And of course, we saw him play another season with Seattle. There are other rumors going around that maybe he'll be in the NFC in the North. So I don't know if I buy into those. I don't think that it's a recipe for winning just yet, but I guess we'll keep an open mind as well here and not sway one way or another, because you never know.
Well, I sway one way. I don't buy this stuff. I mean, I haven't since last offseason, so I'm going to go with what Russell was saying at the end of the year. I want to win more Super Bowls, and I'm going to do it here in Seattle. Okay. All of that talk, I'm buying into that, not whatever report comes from Ian Rappaport or whatever. Russell's got 2 years on his contract left. He's not going to be traded unless the team wants to.
Right.
And ultimately, if you're in the general manager chair, right, it's how do I equate his value, right? Because if you still want to contend and all that, you're not trying to tear everything down and rebuild. You got to think, okay, I need a quarterback if I trade mine, right? So there's a lot more that goes into it. Just, Russell's unhappy. There's so many more aspects to it. So until Russell Wilson puts his claim in and says, I want to be traded from the Seattle Seahawks, not buying it.
And we hope that does not happen.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, exactly. Just a small thing on league news. Former Seahawks running back Marshawn Lynch reportedly is in consideration to join the new Thursday Night Football staff. Amazon, who is now taking over Thursday Night Football, is reportedly considering the former Seahawks running back to be part of a studio show for Thursday Night Football next season. I know Marshawn was on the Manning cast on Monday Night Football. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't.
Used some vulgarities. Marshawn's always a treasure to have around. And it's interesting to see him be a little bit more involved with things like media, with commercials. Because, when he was here, we can go down the list of memorable quotes.
Oh, yeah.
But it's interesting to see. I don't know if he would do a studio show, because I'm sure especially Amazon, would want to keep the swearing to a minimum. But it's interesting to see. And he's certainly a personality. He's not like he's just some boring guy, right? He's a personality, and I think that's why Amazon wants him. Whether or not he agrees to that, to be seen. Just a quick note on the Mariners here. The Mariners signed a few international prospects. Now, we're still in the MLB lockout, and I'll address that in a second. But because they're not major league contracts, the Mariners can still do so. The Mariners signed the number 8, number 41, and number 48 international prospects. Those in order being Lazaro Montes, Michael Arroyo, and Martin Gonzalez. So much more in baseball going on than just here in the U.S. A lot going on in the U.S. properties internationally. So the league notes on the lockout is that the MLB and the Players Association met on Thursday right? People got their hopes up, me being one of them. In order to get some, I believe the league itself was going to put some offers on the table. The players' reaction to the proposal was not good. And so we are still at square one and still really have no idea where we're going to be as we approach February. And early February is when pitchers and catchers are supposed to report. Supposed to. So ultimately, we will see how that goes. But right now, we're still in uncharted waters, still kind of doggy paddling through the mess here. As we head over to our storm, and I'll let Bel guide us through that.
So